So picture this. You're standing in your kitchen, you look at your partner and you say, you ignored me all night.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
We all know how this goes.
Right. And they look back at you, genuinely baffled, and they go, I didn't ignore you. I was putting the kids to bed, and then I had to, answer this massive work email.
Yep.
And suddenly, out of nowhere, you are in this massive relationship-defining fight, even though technically both of you are telling the absolute 100% truth.
It is honestly the most uniquely maddening experience in human communication.
It really is.
You're just staring at each other, and you're both completely convinced of your own accuracy. You both hold the receipts, basically.
Yeah.
And yet you were just miles apart.
Yeah. And the harder you try to explain your side, the worse the fight actually gets.
Exactly.
Which is exactly why we are dedicating this deep dive to solving that specific gridlock. So the mission today is to give you a shortcut to avoiding those conversational black holes.
Right, because nobody wants to be stuck there.
No, it's exhausting. So to do this, we are unpacking this really fascinating stack of sources, outlining something called the Deru Kailo system.
Yeah, the Deru Kailo system.
Just to give you some quick context, Deru Kailo is this really expansive modern framework. It's synthesized from cognitive psychology, linguistics, conflict resolution. It's essentially a masterclass in how human beings make meaning out of conflict.
It really is.
And it maps everything out through these different conceptual layers, which I found so helpful.
It's incredibly useful because, we usually treat conversations as if they only have one layer. We think, well, if I just explain the facts more clearly, this person will understand me.
Just give them more data.
Right, more data will fix it.
Hmm.
But the Deru Kailo framework suggests that trying to fix a communication breakdown with just more facts is, it's often like trying to fix a software problem by hitting the monitor.
Oh, I love that analogy from the sources. Have you ever actually done that?
Hit the monitor. Oh, absolutely.
Right. You stare at a frozen screen, maybe you smack the side of the monitor, maybe you even go out and buy a more expensive screen. But if the bug is in the code, the hardware doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
You are just on the wrong layer. The hardware is totally fine. The software is where the issue actually lives.
And this brings us straight back to that kitchen argument. Let's look at the actual mechanics of what is happening when someone says, you ignored me, and the other person replies, I didn't, I was busy.
Because on the surface, it just looks like a disagreement over the timeline of an evening.
Right. But the framework identifies this as the viewer problem.
The viewer problem.
The conversation breaks down instantly because both people think they're answering the central issue.
Yeah.
They believe they're looking at the exact same screen.
Right.
But psychologically, they're operating on two entirely different planes of reality.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the sources call this the hidden mismatch between the reality layer and the experiential layer.
Yes.
And this really seems to be the core of the whole system.
It is the absolute core.
Yeah.
So let's start with the person who says, I didn't ignore you, I was busy.
Okay.
That person is operating on the reality layer. They are trying to establish the physical chronological facts of the evening. They're basically answering the question, what actually happened?
The literal events.
Exactly. And from their perspective, the facts are clear, right? I was working, I was distracted, I was physically in another room. Therefore, the accusation of ignoring you is factually incorrect.
Which, makes perfect sense to them. But the other person, the one who said, you ignored me, they are not actually making a simple factual claim, even if it sounds like one.
Right.
They are speaking from the experiential layer. They aren't trying to debate the physical location of the bodies in the house. They're trying to name how the moment landed for them emotionally.
Exactly. When they say you ignored me, what they're really trying to communicate is, well, that moment made me feel unseen.
Yeah.
I felt unimportant. I experienced your absence as a dismissal, and I just need you to notice how that landed.
But hold on. I am tripping up on this a little bit, and I feel like you, listening right now, might be too. Because from a purely grammatical standpoint, you ignored me is a factual accusation.
It sounds like one, yeah.
Ignored is an active verb. It implies intent. So if someone comes at me and accuses me of an action I didn't take, my immediate biological reflex is going to be to defend the physical facts of what I was doing.
Of course it is.
Why shouldn't I defend my reality?
You absolutely should defend your reality. And, we will get to how you do that safely in a bit.
Okay, good.
But your reaction just highlighted exactly why the viewer problem is so dangerous. When you hear, you ignored me, you're brain's threat detection system instantly lights up.
Oh, totally.
The amygdala fires.
Yeah.
You feel your identity as, a good, attentive person being attacked. So to protect yourself, you instinctively grab for facts.
Right. I grab my calendar, my sent emails, my physical alibi.
You grab the facts because facts feel like armor.
Yeah.
But the fundamental mistake we make in communication is treating what happened and how it was received as the exact same claim.
And they just aren't.
They are not the same claim at all. Reality asks, what happened in the room? Experience asks, how was it received in the body?
Oh, that's a great distinction.
The crucial insight from Deru Kailo is that a person can be entirely wrong about part of the factual explanation, like maybe you really were genuinely swamped with a work crisis, and that same person can still be entirely 100% honest about their emotional experience of feeling abandoned.
So they are using the clumsy language of reality to describe this deeply real experience?
Yes, exactly.
And I am hearing the language of reality, feeling threatened, and then just throwing facts back at them to prove them wrong.
And that right there is the trap of accuracy. People think this kind of conflict is just a courtroom trial about who is correct.
Right, like we're litigating the evening.
Was it technically ignoring? Was there a good, verifiable reason for the silence? Was the person actually busy?
And to be clear, those questions do matter, right? The sources aren't saying we should throw objective reality out the window.
Not at all. Not at all. The reality layer anchors us in the physical world. If we don't have shared facts, we just have psychosis.
Yeah, that would be bad.
But those factual questions simply aren't the only questions. Here's where the mismatch becomes destructive. A factual correction can be completely demonstrably true and still fail to answer the emotional experience.
Wow. Yeah.
If you answer an emotional wound only with facts, the other person feels erased. Their experience of feeling unseen just hasn't been touched.
And conversely, if the person who is hurt treats their emotional experience as complete, undeniable proof of what actually happened, well, the accused person feels gaslit.
Right, they feel their reality is being denied.
So the conversation just becomes this endless, exhausting fight over accuracy where both people are technically telling the truth and both people are bleeding.
To help visualize this, the source texts provide a really brilliant, just a very clean two-layer model.
Yes. I want you to picture this in your mind as you're listening. Imagine two separate transparent sheets of plastic. The first sheet is layer one. This is reality, what happened.
Right.
On this sheet, you have statements written in, like black marker. Statements like, I was busy, I was in another room, I did not hear the message, I did not intend to ignore you.
Okay, now imagine the second transparent sheet, layer two. This is experience. How did it land?
Yeah.
On the sheet, you have statements like, I felt dismissed, I felt unimportant, I felt alone in that moment. I experienced it as being ignored.
Now, slide those two sheets together, hold them up to the light. The visual mismatch happens when someone assumes they are looking at one single picture.
Yes.
The reality answer, I was busy, crashes straight into the experience claim. I felt ignored. They're connected, they overlap, but they are absolutely not identical.
It makes me think of, well, you were talking earlier about that delivery driver analogy.
Yes. I actually had a version of this happen recently, which is why it resonated so much. Imagine you order a delicate glass vase online. The delivery driver represents reality. They drive the truck, they drop the box on the porch, take a photo for the app and say, I drove the correct route, I dropped it at the correct door, my job is done. Factually, I delivered the package.
Right. Facts are facts.
But the recipient, who represents experience, opens the box on the kitchen counter and says, the vase inside is shattered into 1,000 pieces.
That is the perfect embodiment of the viewer problem right there.
Right. Because imagine the delivery driver standing in my kitchen, pointing at his GPS app, just arguing, but I drove the right route. Look at the map. I didn't hit any potholes.
Which is true.
His facts are completely true, but him arguing about the route doesn't fix the broken vase in my hands.
And the more he defends the route, the more infuriated you become.
Yeah.
Because you are holding broken glass and he is talking about a map.
Exactly.
The Deru Kailo sources summarize this consequence with a line that just stopped me in my tracks. They say, impact met intention. Nothing was repaired.
Impact met intention.
Nothing was repaired. If you don't locate the right layer, you are just throwing facts at a feeling.
Which brings us to the absolute signature line of this entire framework. It's the phrase you honestly just have to write on a Post-it note and stick to your fridge.
Yes.
Facts can tell us what happened. They do not always tell us how it landed.
Let's sit with that for a second. Facts tell us what happened. They do not always tell us how it landed. If you can internalize that distinction, it changes how you listen to every complaint for the rest of your life.
So here is where it gets really interesting to me. If facts don't magically erase feelings, we have to look at the other side of the coin.
We do.
Do feelings override facts? Because if I'm the guy holding the GPS and you're telling me that your pain is the only thing that matters, I'm going to feel like I'm being held hostage by your emotions.
Totally.
This brings us to a really critical ethical boundary in the Deru Kailo framework.
And this is where the framework proves its rigor, I think, and why it is so effective in high-stakes conflict resolution. Acknowledging someone's experience does not mean feelings override facts,
Thank goodness.
right? Every emotional reaction is not an accurate, objective description of what physically happened. Just because you felt a certain way does not mean reality must immediately bend to validate that feeling as an objective truth.
We have to unpack the underlying mechanism here because the sources highlight a specific cognitive sequence where this goes off the rails. It goes, and tell me if I have this right, it goes experience, then interpretation, then conclusion.
You have that exactly right. And we need to look at why the human brain actually does this. Evolutionarily, we are wired for rapid threat detection.
Makes sense.
If you feel a sudden sharp pain in your leg, that is the experience. Your brain cannot just sit there and ponder the pain. It has to instantly identify the source to keep you alive. That is the interpretation. So your brain jumps from my leg hurts to there's a snake.
But in modern relationships, there is usually no snake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In modern communication, experience says, I felt unsafe. That is the lived impact. That is real.
Yeah.
But the brain, desperate to identify the threat, jumps to interpretation. You are dangerous. And this is the boundary the framework protects. An individual's emotional experience does not automatically prove another person's motive or neglect, harm, or guilt.
Wow.
Experience says, I felt dismissed. Interpretation says, you do not respect me.
So the jump from I felt dismissed to you don't respect me is literally just our brain trying to spot a predator in the bushes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We take our internal emotional data and we project it outward as factual intent.
So for you listening right now, maybe you are constantly on the receiving end of this. You're sitting there thinking, I am constantly being told you made me feel this way, and I am just expected to apologize.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
How do you validate the other person's emotion without admitting to a crime you didn't commit? How do you say, I hear that you feel unsafe, without implicitly agreeing to the interpretation that I am a dangerous person?
The framework handles this by rigorously, and I mean really rigorously, separating intention from impact.
Okay, intention from impact.
Intention explains what someone was trying to do in the reality layer. Impact shows what actually happened to the other person in the experiential layer. The goal of the Deru Kailo system is not to force you to choose between facts or feelings.
Right.
You don't have to surrender your reality, and you don't have to gaslight your partner's feelings.
You just have to hold them in the right order.
You have to separate them clearly enough that neither one erases the other.
This is such a relief you don't have to choose.
Which leads us perfectly into the practical application of this. We have this theory, we have our two transparent sheets, we understand the threat detection in our brains.
Yep.
How do we actually use this the next time we are standing in the kitchen and the temperature starts rising?
The transition from theory to practice relies on a single core habit of mind. It is the ultimate discipline the sources are trying to teach. And this is the highest value insight from the entire stack of research, honestly. Before defending, locate.
Yes.
Before you open your mouth to defend your position, you have to locate what kind of claim the other person is actually making.
You have to ask yourself, are they making a reality claim? Are they saying this is exactly what happened chronologically? Or are they making an experiential claim? Are they saying this is how it felt when it happened?
Because if you defend your innocent intention when the other person is bleeding from the impact, you are answering the wrong layer. Yeah. You are just pointing at the GPS while they are holding the broken glass.
And this happens to the best of us. It really does. In the heat of the moment, the amygdala fires and we just default to the reality layer.
So what happens when you realize you've done exactly that? You are like 3 minutes into a fight, you are aggressively explaining your schedule, and suddenly you realize, oh no, I am on the wrong layer.
Right.
The texts give us a brilliant de-escalation tool for this.
It might be the most valuable sentence in the entire system. When you realize you've missed the mark, you stop, take a breath, and you just say, I answered the wrong layer. Let me go back.
I answered the wrong layer. Let me go back. It is so incredibly disarming. I imagine hearing that from a partner. it takes all the defensive heat out of the room instantly.
It completely changes the dynamic.
Because you aren't admitting defeat. You aren't saying, you are right, I am a terrible person who ignored you. You are just admitting a mislocation.
It requires humility, certainly, but it isn't a surrender of your facts. You were just saying, I see that you were talking about the impact on your feelings, and I was busy answering with my logistical intention. Let me go back to how it landed for you.
The sources actually give us a few exact practical repair sentences that you can just memorize and keep in your back pocket. The first one is really simple. I want to clarify what happened, but I don't want to dismiss how it felt.
Notice the architecture of that sentence. It holds both domains. It explicitly protects your right to clarify reality, but it prioritizes the acknowledgement of their emotional experience.
There is also an optional fuller version from the focus material, which I actually really love. It goes, I want to explain what was happening on my side, but I don't want that to erase how it landed for you.
What is so powerful about these phrases is that the conflict almost always begins to de-escalate the exact second. People stop using one layer to cancel the other.
That makes so much sense.
When your partner hears, I don't want to erase how it landed for you, their nervous system can finally stand down. They can stop fighting to prove that their pain is real. And once their pain is acknowledged and safe, they're usually much more willing to hear your explanation of the context.
It's liberating. You don't have to choose between being right and being compassionate.
Exactly.
If someone says, that hurt me, and you reflexively say, well, I didn't mean to, you are using your intention to try and erase their impact. But if you say, I didn't mean to, but I hear that it hurt and I want to understand that, you are holding both.
And doing this requires us to let go of the very stubborn idea that understanding equals agreement.
Oh, that's a big one.
The Deru Kailo sources are very strict about this boundary. You can understand someone's experience completely and still disagree with their interpretation of your motives.
Yeah.
You can validate that they felt deeply ignored while still holding the firm factual boundary that you were genuinely busy and did not do it maliciously.
Okay, let's pull all of this together. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground in this deep dive. The core takeaway for you listening right now is this. Facts matter, experience matters. But they do entirely different work in human communication.
They absolutely do.
Facts clarify the event. Experience clarifies the impact. The shortcut to being a better communicator, a better partner, a better colleague is simply locating the layer. When the conversation gridlocks, ask yourself, are we arguing about what happened or how it felt? Are we arguing about the route the driver took or the broken vase in the box?
That is the perfect summary for our interpersonal lives. But if we pull the lens back, the implications of this framework go far beyond our living rooms.
I was hoping we'd get to this.
Yeah, the Deru Kailo sources actually mention deeper layers, what they call the symbolic and meta layers. These deal with what events represent and the larger worldview we use to interpret reality.
So how does this layer collapse play out on a macro scale?
Well, this raises a really important, somewhat provocative question to leave you with. If we struggle this much to separate reality from experience in our own private, intimate conflicts, if we get this bogged down and defensive, just arguing over a text message or putting the kids to bed, what happens when an entire society does this?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Think about our public discourse today. Think about our political debates or how we argue in the comment sections on the internet.
It is pure chaos. It feels like everyone is just shouting completely past each other, getting angrier and angrier by the minute.
And the framework suggests that this chaos isn't just because people are stubborn, it is structural. Are societal culture wars just massive, unresolved layer mismatches?
That's a huge idea.
Think about it. You have one side of a debate speaking entirely from the experiential and symbolic layers, screaming, this is my lived experience. This is what this policy represents to my identity, my community, and my safety.
Right.
And then you have the other half of the population speaking from the reality and structural layers, shouting back, but look at the factual data. Look at the economic statistics. The numbers don't support your fear.
And just like the couple in the kitchen, they both think they're talking about the exact same thing. They think they're answering each other, but they are operating on completely different planes of reality. The data doesn't erase the lived experience, and the lived experience doesn't invalidate the data.
Precisely. If layer collapse is happening at the civilization level, where we treat statistical data and emotional feelings as if they are the exact same kind of truth claim, we are going to remain in perpetual gridlock.
Because you can't win.
Neither side can ever win, because they aren't even fighting on the same battlefield. So maybe the first step to healing our public discourse doesn't start with crafting better, sharper arguments. Maybe it starts with asking one simple question, the exact same one we ask at the kitchen table. Which layer are we actually fighting on?
That is a profound thought to take with us. Are we trying to fix the software code by screaming at the monitor?
Right.
Before you defend, locate. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Take these tools, test them out in your own conversations this week, and the next time you hit that wall, just remember to ask yourself, are we looking at the code or are we just staring at the screen? We'll see you next time.